The first time I heard my name echo across the community hall. It came clipped and too bright, like a metal spoon tapping the side of a glass. The microphone popped, a stray hiss washed over the front rows, and someone behind me laughed through their nose. I could smell warm dust from the ceiling fans, their belts worn to a shine. I could feel the plastic chair legs skidding on terrazzo as people adjusted to watch. On the stage, the folding table looked like a makeshift court. 2 bottles of mineral water, a heap of manila folders, a blue binder, and, laid in the center like a trophy, my office name tagged, a little brass rectangle on a black ribbon propped against a coaster so everyone could see it. The tag that had spent a year on my chest, brushed by hallways of cousins, uncles, suppliers, drivers, auditors, and the occasional minister's aide. It gleamed under the strip light, and I saw the change. Not the hairline scratch near the A in my first name. Not the scuff where the clasp rubbed an O. They'd taped a white label across it, the kind from a budget labeler, and typed in a new word in block caps, crooked and off-center: assistant. My own name hidden. The paper already curling at the edges, a joke, dressed as an agenda item. The hall was Marani Community Center off Kiabani Shabazz, Karachi, our family's favored neutral ground when in-house confrontations needed an audience. 200 chairs, portable fans, an old wedding stage repurposed with brown curtains and sagging golden swags. The scent was disinfectant with a top note of cumin from the cafeteria downstairs, where a caterer was laying out samosas for the trustees of something else. A cousin with gelled hair fairy swarmed the room with introductions. It's just a family review. He said, just clarifications, a script I'd heard in gentler rooms. He held the microphone like a TV host and didn't look at me. The old men with prayer caps whispered and fanned themselves with the agenda sheets. The moms clicked bangles. My aunt in her silk shawl sat in the center of the front row like a queen who'd been asked to come from her soaps for this bother. Her lips a thin cut of coral. Before we begin, Ferris said we must address the issue of titles. There has been confusion. He pinched the name tag off the coaster and showed the hall. A few laughs rose from the right side, our import division, like the first drops before rain. A sound like agreement and something colder behind it. This, Ferris said, was premature. We never approved it. I could feel the pulse in my neck, steady but present. One line of stakes ran hot in my head. If I let them, they would rewrite me, and with me, the record my work, my status, my share, my future. In the next minutes, you'll see how a taped label on a metal rectangle cost a family its favorite disguise and gave me my real name. A waiter from the cafeteria delivered another jug of water, and the smell of frying burst through the air like a brass cymbal. On the back wall, one of the strip lights flickered. The light over the aisle stuttered on and off. And in each blink, I could see the room differently: open, closed, mine, not mine. I traced the taped label with my eyes the way I would trace a sentence in an affidavit. Who typed it? Who approved the agenda item? Why bring a small object onto a stage unless you plan to turn a person into a category? Seems I'm not family after all. That's what the white label said to me in that first second, without words. A woman 2 rows behind me shifted her handbag to the floor, and the leather brushed my heel. The air was warm. I could feel sweat under my watchband, my sleeve sticking to my skin where I'd spilled tea earlier on the drive and wiped it with a tissue. I looked down at my notebook hard green cover, ruled pages, and saw the list I'd written last night by the light of my bedside lamp. It's the bulb too white. Audit Clause 7.3. Clause 12B of the Partnership Deed. SECP Form 29 filings. Bank freeze code phrase. Courier slips. Camera angle in the reception. The redacted line in the general ledger. The HR policy last updated 6 months ago. The slot key in the assistant manager's drawer. My pen lay across the page, the tiny scratch on its clip catching the light. I'd polished it by habit while I waited in the hall for them to finish their theatrics. The pen had weight. The tag had a label. When Ferris finished, he invited the HR lead to explain how my title had been. For clarity, revised. A young man I'd never seen stood up in a shirt too tight across the shoulders and read from his phone. "I checked was not on payroll 3 weeks ago." He spoke a sentence I had seen before. Titles should reflect confirmed scope. And scope is confirmed by oversight, not declared by individual initiative. It was a script borrowed. They had rehearsed it. On the stage, the blue binder was lying flat. The binder was my binder, the one with the warranty agreements for the imported chillers. It had a dent on the spine where my bag buckle had knocked it against the elevator 2 months ago. The dent now faced the hall. Whoever set the table knew the binder needed to be visible because it anchored the story of me taking too much space. I saw the dent and remembered the elevator mirror, how my own face had looked back, tired but sure. "Point of order," I said. I stood, my chair scraping. My voice was even. I named myself, then said, "I'll listen and I'll speak. But before you rename me, let's refer to the documents we've all signed." The microphone passed to me, warm from palms and stained with a thumbprint of my cousin's stubble-dark jawline on the silver grill. I held it and felt the room adjust itself just a fraction. The ceiling fan swung arcs of moving air. The cables hummed lightly above the fluted curtains. Ferris angled his chin at the side table where 3 elders sat. And I understood the choreography. Let the young fight, the old nod. "I won't shout," I said, "mostly for myself. I'll use process and receipts." My aunt's lips tightened. Someone at the back muttered, "Process," like it was an insult. The object appeared and disappeared in my head. My tag. The first micro-mystery, who had access to my drawer last Friday? The second, why was my binder on that table instead of in the locked cabinet I'd keylogged at 1842 3 days ago? The chairs creaked as people settled for a longer scene. We had entered the part of the story where the room begins to map itself. On the left, import division. Right, retail. Back, warehousing. Front, family. A word stretched to fit allegiance. Empty chairs at the far right, 3 in a row, place cards missing. The place cards had been printed this morning. Someone had removed them. A quiet revision. On stage, the jug of water sweated a circle into the paper tablecloth. A bead rolled down the glass like a slow line break. 2 chairs behind me, a low voice said, "She won't let it go." I watched Ferris put the tag down near the edge, precarious, as if it could fall and clatter the way this meeting might. He wanted noise. He wanted me in the role of the overreacher. It would be boring, maybe, if I told you every small trespass that brought us here. Boring the way a ledger is boring until someone tries to spend your work out from under you and calls it a misunderstanding. I'll tell you just enough. The office our office sat on the 3rd floor of a low-rise in Clifton. A building with old marble floors and a guard named Riaz, who read Urdu thrillers on night shift. My first day had smelled like polish and something older. A smell inside documents kept too long in heat. My name tag had been waiting in a drawer unissued, a small kindness from our HR then. A woman named Shaista, who had worked in banking a decade and wore sensible shoes. "Take it," she'd said. "Claim your space." I was 32 then. With a degree in operations and a habit of labeling cords and shelves you could call obsessive. Or you could call how the work stays done. Red flags were ribbons tied to everyday things. A delivery signed by a man whose name never lined up with his ID. Invoices rounded to the nearest thousand in a way that suggested someone liked clean numbers more than accuracy. An uncle who would say, "We don't need to complicate this," when the complication was compliance. A petty cash replenishment that did not match the withdrawals in the ledger. An intro commission that arrived as a wire with a subject line only a fool would write. I learned our accounts like a neighborhood. After 3 months, I could walk the general ledger with my eyes closed and tell you where the light bulb was broken. Where rats had gnawed through the margin. I learned to read fingers. I learned the way the receptionist, Huma, looked at the entrance before she buzzed someone in when a cousin was late with salaries. I learned to keep my laptop bag on my lap in meetings where my aunt requested tea and sugar she wouldn't drink. The office aircon hummed like a kept secret. I held on to one vow, like a bead between finger and thumb. I won't shout. I'll use process and receipts. It took 6 months before the first major adjustment came through. A reversed booking in our import expense line. Backdated, tagged reclassification. No memo, no note. I traced it to a login at 1912 after staff left. The audit log said admin. Admin was theoretically 3 people. In practice, admin was a password in the head of a cousin who liked to stand too close and smell like sharp cologne. I documented it. I saved screenshots with timestamps. I printed summaries and had Shasta initial them. I filed them in a blue binder with my dent on the spine. I learned we were all characters in my aunt's long-running serial where the good girl waits and is rewarded by patience. I didn't fit the script. I moved my chair an inch at a time until it faced the door, not the wall. I asked for redundantly. Access for staff. I asked for purchase approvals to be recorded, not just verbal. I asked for dual sign-offs for transfers above 500,000 rupees. I was the kind of woman who writes a suggestion in an email and then prints a copy and staples the envelope to a manila file because inboxes are sources of heat and men forget. A sense memory. The small of the office on a Saturday evening. When the sun baked the parking lot and the world above us was the metallic clatter of birds and a motorcycle braking. The light through our blinds golden and dusty. The copier warm. The plastic of my name tag just slightly tacky against my cotton kurta after a long day. Then clean when I slid it into the drawer with the extra staples and the pen refills and clicked it shut. I had taped a note under the drawer's lip tag. It made me smile. 3 times over a year, someone tried to reset my access. 3 times, I escalated. The first time, the bank manager I'd brought into our web, the kind woman at United Bank. Tariq Road branch, named Needgold, to confirm, are you asking for view only to be changed to maker? I said no. She said, thought so. I kept the bank logs. The second time the attempt failed because I'd required a second factor to be held in the safe. The third, we froze the change and recorded it. I filed the freeze request with a handwritten receive stamp because our stamp was missing. And missing is when men pretend something isn't in your hand if they want you to stop holding it. In that year, I gathered what I needed, like a bird building a nest out of receipts and printouts and the white backs of courier slips. Procedural assets, you could call them. If you like the taste of those words as much as I do, the partnership deed with Clause 12B, about rights to request third-party audits. The trustees' last resolution. Copies of Form 29. Affidavits from vendors we actually paid and the ones we didn't but said we did. A thread of reversal emails where a mistake got fixed and then clarified. The bank's wire confirmations. A recording from a meeting where my title was discussed in phrases that danced around the law like a dervish around a fire. The call recordings lived on a small black device in my tote bag in a zippered pocket. The device was legal. Our policy allowed note-taking. They had never read our policy. They thought policy was a word like impression, like scent, like the smell of perfume in the hallway that fades and matters to nobody. But policy written is policy that can be cited. Cited policy can be enforced. I don't know when the decision became solid in me. When it left the realm of should I and became the thing I would do while my tea cooled? Maybe it was the Thursday my aunt said, schedules are for salaried people. When I asked for overtime pay for the warehouse staff who had unloaded a container in heat that felt like a mouth breathing. Maybe it was the time Ferris forgot my email on the invite to the bank meeting where they negotiated a new limit. Maybe it was whispering to a junior accountant who'd found a mismatch and said, I need this job, Badgie, please don't bring my name in. Maybe it was the day I found my drawer unlocked and my name tag turned upside down on the pile of sticky notes. We all have a threshold. Mine is made of paper and ink and metal. When they started to draft the agenda for the community hall, they did it as a show of strength. I did not try to stop the show. I reserved tickets and arranged my cast. To be precise, a lawyer named Sadaf who believed in wellness but also in stamped seals. A forensic auditor, Ali, whose idea of a good time was reconciling to ledgers separated by malice. A registrar clerk from the SECP Faisal who would answer questions but not more. Nita, the bank manager. The building's security chief Riaz, who'd been promoted. A neighbor Sheba, a chartered accountant who could quote clause numbers like recipes. And an HR manager from a company 3 floors above ours, Rima, who had resigned from our firm years ago with an exit interview. Nobody filed. Everyone I called had a reason to say yes to me and a reason to say no to them. Because justice, to be dignified, requires no more than a level table and the chair that's yours. I did one more thing before the meeting. I called an auditor formally, evoking Clause 12B of our partnership deed, and requested a third-party review of our internal controls. The letter was executed on a Friday morning at 9:03 a.m., notarized by noon, and couriered with a manifest that I photocopied before the ink dried. I sent notice to all partners by email with read receipts turned on. And I printed the bounce backs for the ones who liked to pretend their inboxes were seas that swallowed evidence. I used my favorite words: filed, served, recorded, timestamped, certified, witnessed. I copied the regulator's inquiry desk. I kept it clean. At the hall, when I lifted the microphone, I could taste the metal and the ghost of someone else's breath. "Thank you," I said, to the room that had not decided yet whether to be for me or against. "Let's proceed." I asked the HR lead his name. He said it. I asked, "When were you hired?" He said, "Last month." I asked, "Who is your reporting line?" He hesitated and said a surname, not a role. I thanked him. I asked for the policy that allowed title changes by label maker. He smiled like a boy asked to solve a problem just beyond his school year. He did not have it. I asked Ferris to place my tag flat. They did. The sound of a label unsticking was a sound I knew in my bones. "Is this necessary?" My aunt said. She said it the way people say, "Is this who we are now?" when they mean you are not in your place. "We're a family," someone said, as if the word were citadel and moat and drawbridge and guard all at once. I let the sentence hang. The light hummed. The fans ticked. Breath in. The smell, disinfectant, warm plastic, paper. Seems I'm not family after all. I did not say it aloud this time. I put the microphone on the table and took out the blue binder. The dent gleamed. "This," I said, "is what I do." I opened to the tab with our import expense reclassification. The tab was red. I read the transaction ID. I read the timestamp, the wire ID, the login used. I read like a Quran recitation with pauses to let the room hold each line. I flipped a page. The sound of paper is a quiet hammer. "This," I said, "is a purchase order created after a delivery." And next to it, a delivery note printed on the copier that leaves a thin gray line on the left margin. "This," I said, "is the vendor's affidavit signed and stamped that they never delivered these items." I flipped again. "This," I said, "is the bank's confirmation that the reversal was executed at 1912. And here I held up a printed email is an instruction to approve the change. Not from me, from admin. Admin is not a person. Admin is a mask. The hall shifted. Chairs scraped. The sound of bangles stopped. "And this," I said, "is the letter served last week, invoking our right under 12B to appoint a third-party auditor. Allie is here." I motioned. Allie nodded like a man acknowledging a bus he had been expecting. We moved. A process in motion is a relief the difference between a promise and a receipt. I put receipts down one after another. I passed them to the table and watched the elders look. The blue binder marked with my dent had the weight of weeks spent in an office at dusk. The smell of warm plastic. My aunt sat very still. "Overstep," Farah said finally, trying to find the word that always worked. "She's overstepped." I looked at the name tag. My name hid under the white sticker, like a face under a veil, not of her choosing. "Let's bring the bank in," I said. "Nita?" She stood from the second row, her dupatta pinned in two places like a woman used to safety and two moving in a room where men might try to block her. Transfers above 500,000 now require dual sign-off. She said as of June, per their request. She looked at my aunt. "You all signed. We have it recorded." She glanced at me. "You also asked for a freeze code." She recited ITNO. She did not say the code. She gestured to the paper I had printed that morning, our freeze code. A phrase of my choosing embedded in a sentence that would alert her to pause any changes. I had chosen a line from a poem I loved because people underestimate the longevity of poetry compared to passwords. She had used it once already, last week, when a request came after ours. She looked at me then and nodded. The nod said we complied. The HR lead sat down. He had given his lines. He could not ad-lib. Ryas from our building cleared his throat from the aisle. He held a USB drive between thumb and finger. He explained the camera above the reception, the one my cousins forgot about. He said the footage from last Friday between 19 o'clock and 20 o'clock showed someone entering my office with the master key. He said he brought stills. He said he would not let the USB leave his hand unless someone signed for it. He looked at me. I produced a receipt pad. I wrote a line. He signed. The ballpoint left a neat line of ink, steady, like his voice. The lights hummed. The hall smelled like sweat now, and fried dough, and a sweetness from somewhere. I thought of the first time I'd seen that white label in a dream, peeling at the edge. The one-line pulse in me slowed. Then steadied. The girl behind me shifted and her ankle brushed my chair. I'll fast forward through the first hour, not because I am merciful, but because repetition is a tool people use against women who keep receipts. They say we're going in circles, as if the circle were an accident and not the design. We did not circle. We moved by stamps and signatures. Ali read an extract from the audit trail. Sadaf read from our partnership deed and clarified that removing duties from my role without process would be voidable and could be enjoined. Faisal, the registrar clerk, sat like a man whose job involved long corridors. And when my aunt asked if we could handle this internally, he said internal actions do not replace statutory compliance. He said it with the impact of a stamp hitting paper. When we reached the part where they had paid experts, it became almost beautiful. In a mechanical sense, how the pieces clicked. The invoices did not line up with the bank logs. The vendor addresses were P.O. boxes. The courier slips showed returns. A number repeated in the wire confirmations belonged to a phone my cousin's driver used for his cricket fantasy league. The SIM was registered to an uncle's bakery. The audit trail converged like drainage into a single grate where their story clogged and coughed. A small cliff appeared, and we climbed it when a sealed envelope arrived by a sweating courier, and Ferris opened it on stage with a practiced calm that told me he had not seen the inside. He expected it to be something else. It was audit scheduling from the third-party firm dates, document requests, initial questions. No surprise visits, the letter said. Per our policy, and my aunt pounced, you see. They must schedule. We will present what is proper. She had not realized yet that schedule meant time to preserve, not time to fabricate. That my notices included a preservation order. That I had already requested the server mirror be imaged and sealed. We broke for tea. Outside the hall, the light was like a brass plate, hot and reflective. The air smelled like diesel and cardamom and the faint brine you get when the wind remembers the sea. Stacked chairs leaned against the wall like giant ribs. I stood under a fan and let it lift hair off my neck and cool the sweat at my temples. Someone passed with a plate of samosas, and the oil smell felt like childhood. And wedding halls and being 10 years old and eating standing up while women talked about someone else's future. When we returned, there were fewer jokes. The name tag lay flat, the white label buckling. We widened the net. I asked about the charity board our family chaired. A small pepper of interest ran through the hall. The charity was sacred. We didn't touch the charity. But the charity paid for our air conditioner sometimes, and invoices from the charity ended up in our expenses. I presented screenshots. Sheba quoted the tax code. Ali traced a wire through 3 accounts and back like a ball of yarn pulled from under a couch and shaken out. We didn't accuse. We delivered content. Content has its own weight. Remarks failed to lift against it. Somewhere in the stretch of that second hour, a new lever slid into place. Not yet pulled, but present. Tucked into the partnership deed was a clause about custodial control when a partner was unavailable or conflicted. I had underlined it thrice in pencil last night. My hand hurt from pressing hard. Custodial control meant I could assume certain functions temporarily to preserve records, to prevent loss. The clause was meant for illness and travel. It did not exclude mischief. I put my finger on the clause and left it there. Ferris glanced at my finger as if it were a gun. We paid off one loop then, quietly. I asked for the locked drawer in the side office to be opened. My aunt looked at Ferris. Ferris looked at an assistant. The assistant had no key. I took a key from my bag. I had signed it out yesterday with a guard witness. The key clicked. Inside envelopes, receipts, a stack of badge blanks. One badge printed, mine, with my name half laminated and stuck. As if the machine had jammed halfway through a process of erasing me. I held it up, the plastic still tacky, edges rough where fingers had picked. A murmur ran through the room like a small animal. We planted a new lever. The badge machine logged prints. We would pull that lever later. In these scenes, I do not want to make myself a hero. I want to show you how procedure resizes a room. Eye lines shift. A nephew stops smirking and looks at the table. A woman in the second row takes out a notebook. The hall becomes a court not because someone says order, but because facts, once arranged, begin to insist on themselves. I saw it happen to faces I had known all my life, loved even a slippage from performance to attention. There was a moment small, private in the way a gesture can be, even when seen by many, when my aunt touched the edge of the table with her fingertips and then withdrew her hand as if the wood had heat. The motion was the tell. It told me she knew this was not theater now. It told me everything that would come after must be done quietly and with words like compliance and policy and for the good of all. Words she would have to borrow from me. We reached the public reckoning without raised voices. I asked Ferris to speak. He stood and said the line I knew he would. 'Cause men like him keep one in their pocket the way boys keep coins. We should not wash linen in public. He gestured at the elders as if they were a curtain. We can resolve. I thanked him. I said now it is public because you made it public. And the stage was a stage, and my name tag lay with a label still hiding my name. I peeled it. The paper came away in a curl and left a smudge of adhesive. I wiped it with a square of gauze from my bag gauze I kept for paper cuts because I used paper enough to bleed by it. My name shone. I did not hold the tag up. I placed it beside the binder and spoke so the hall had to lean in to hear. Titles follow work, I said. Work follows process. Process follows law. I recited steps like a rosary. The reclassification is reversed. The relevant payments are frozen pending audit. The charity reimbursements are rescinded. Access changes executed without approval are voided. Audit schedules are filed and served. Any destruction of documents will be reported and enjoined. Each verb sat like a stamp hitting paper. Nita and Ali and Sadaf each said, confirmed in their turns, brief, economical. Letting each word land like the thud of a ledger closing. Ferris laughed once, a sound that started and did not finish. His glass of water set too hard on the table, a tell. He opened his mouth. I let him. She's making a mess, he said. She's bitter. He looked at me as if I were a stain on velvet. You are not. He caught the word before it came undone. Family. I supplied, not sweet. Professional, he said. You are not professional. The room held. I felt my mouth go dry. I sipped water. The plastic cup flexed, then returned to shape. The light above me steadied. The flicker stopped. Seems I'm not family after all. This third time, the line was not a wound, but an edge I stepped onto and felt hold. We went to the part of any reckoning where gifts of mercy and the price of them are weighed. Let's step aside, my aunt said in a new tone. Women to women. The elders nodded, relieved. I declined. Here, I said. Please. I kept my voice low, my vowels clean. My aunt held my gaze like a rope she might pull. We'll adjust this, she said. Your title. Your package. She spread her hand over the table in a gesture that meant abundance. But don't bring trouble. I didn't bring trouble, I said. I brought light. We wrote Sadaf drafted amendments to our internal controls on a lined pad. The security chief witnessed signatures. We logged bookings to reverse the reclassification. We rescinded to vendor relationships on paper after verifying they were shells. We revoked admin's ability to be a mask. We recorded new dual sign-offs. We transferred oversight of the badge system to HR proper. We froze discretionary spending pending audit completion. We audited a random sample of the last quarter's expenses for pattern detection. We redacted sensitive lines before sharing with the hall. We timestamped it all. We certified, we countersigned. We complied. In the week after, ripples moved like rings in water after a stone. Through the office floors, through family groups where women talk frankly, through supplier WhatsApps with stickers at the end to soften the truth. An uncle resigned from active duties and declared a sabbatical on Facebook with a photo in Hunza. Like the mountains had ordered him to rest. A donor to the charity asked polite questions that were not quite polite. The bank sent a notice about an upcoming visit and called it routine, which is the bank equivalent of a raised eyebrow. To junior accountants who had gone silent in halls, asked me to coffee, and then asked if they might join a new team I was forming. A revised HR policy appeared, clean and firm. I wrote a training manual and sent it for approvals, then for signatures. A cousin wrote me a text that began no hard feelings and ended with a prayer emoji. I did not reply. Riaz delivered a brown envelope to my desk with stills from the camera and a note in block letters. Always a witness. And I put it in the blue binder under a tab marked cameras. The badge machine registered prints. They matched. This we tucked into the audit file. The contact saved under V in my aunt's phone turned out not to be vendor but Visa, a man who brokered travel. This we put aside outside our scope. In the aftermath, I walked past my name on a door and felt the small thrum of a wind. Not loud but honest. The light in the office at 6:30 p.m. on a Tuesday in autumn is kind to paperwork and to people who do it. The air smells like dust and toner and the tea someone forgot to finish. My name tag sat on the edge of my desk, clean, adhesive, rubbed off with oil and patience. A thin white line where the label had been was visible only if you got close and looked for it. The way scars are visible to the person who lived them and lovers who pay attention. On a Friday, 2 weeks later, I took early leave and went to the beach, where the wind carries salt and diesel and the cries of sellers of corn rubbed with chili and lime. The sky was a sheet of stainless steel. I stood with my sandals in one hand and my phone off and felt the water reach for my toes and draw away and return. Tireless as paperwork and better for the soul. I thought about mercy. I had not made a public spectacle beyond what they staged. I had not named names outside our necessity. I allowed in the quiet of my head that everyone who tried to reduce me had been the size their fear made them. And now they had room to become bigger if they chose. I was not responsible for their choice. At home, a small apartment with patterned tiles. I had chosen after holding too many things I didn't choose. I wrote letters on my dining table that had a wobble in one leg. I notified vendors of updated procedures. I filed a complaint with the compliance hotline regarding the badge. Tempt in case our third-party auditor felt we were going soft. I updated my neighbor Sheba on the charity board's new policy draft and saw her face lighten like a door opening inward. I drew a box around the word ritual in my notebook and wrote beneath it, "Keep a steady tea time after 6. Name, who helped. Buy flowers often." I put my hand on the table and felt the grain under the varnish, a tactile promise that surfaces, too, can hold memory. I did not become an avenging angel. I became what I had always been, an operations analyst who loved systems, but now the system included me. I bought a new pen, the same model as the old, but this one with a finer nib. And when I signed, I looked at the ink travel and thought of maps. I spoke with Rima from the 4th floor, who asked if I would mentor her junior on internal controls. I said yes. I called Shasta, who had left our firm after they decided she was too strict, and asked her to consult for us for a season. She laughed like a clay pot, tapped and said she'd think about it. The sound pleased me. 3 months later, after the audit report had been digested and actioned, after the board had adopted new measures, after my aunt had stopped looking at me like I had moved her furniture without asking and started looking like a woman learning a new room, I went to a rooftop restaurant with a friend, just a friend, though the air felt like something might at last become softer. The city was a belt of lights. The grill sent up smoke that smelled like cumin and lemon. The table was slightly sticky with humidity. I put my bag on a spare chair and balanced my phone on the salt cellar. He asked me if I was tired of fighting. I said no. And then sometimes, and then it isn't fighting when it's filing. He laughed. He reached across the table and straightened my name tag where I had pinned it to my shawl as a joke for the evening. The metal warmed from my skin. We ate. We didn't talk about family, not much. We talked about cricket and books and a trip to Gwadar he wanted to take in winter. And then the waiter brought a dessert with a sparkler stuck in it by mistake, and the sparkler threw tiny stars into the air between us, and I thought, this is a kind of audit 2 of happiness. I keep in my desk drawer an envelope with 3 things: a photocopy of the partnership deed with my pencil, underlines, and thumbprint smudges, the courier slip from the day we served the audit letter, and my name tag's peeled label, flattened between 2 pieces of plastic. Its glue now dry. I showed it once to a junior who thought systems were only numbers and not also stories. This label, I told her, is what they wanted you to call yourself. Be careful what you reply to. Some people ask if I regret bringing in a third-party auditor, if I regret making family into paperwork. I tell them the truth. Family is the first paperwork. We just pretend it is not written. I prefer ink to pretense. Ink can be traced. Ink can be beautiful. The day we filed our final response to the audit with the regulator, the sky over Karachi was the clear of a new stainless pan. The air smelled like dust and the first hint of winter. I took the long way to the office and bought flowers from the woman at the corner who wraps them in newspaper with a twist. I put them in a glass on my desk. People came and asked what the occasion was. I said, it's Friday. I brewed tea at 6. I thought of the hall. I thought of the stage. I thought of the girl behind me whose ankle had brushed my chair and how she had stayed until the end. And I hoped she went home that night and slept well and woke up with a list in her head and a pen in her hand. If you've ever had your name folded smaller to fit someone else's envelope, unfold it. If this story helped pass it on to someone who needs process more than approval, and if you're ready to start your own paper trail, say the word deal, share the first checklist.